The Suez Canal was funded by France and Egypt, and it opened in 1869. It's important because it is the shortest ocean link between the Mediterranean and Indian Ocean, and so it connects Africa and Asia. Although the canal is technically in Egyptian space, Egypt sold its shares of the canal operating company to Britain when it couldn't pay its debts in 1875. A few years later, the canal was declared a neutral zone under British protection, meaning that all international ships should be able to pass through regardless of whether there were peace or war times. Flash forward to the 1910s and the First World War, when Britain violated this treaty and refused to let non-Allied ships pass through. In response, the Germans stormed the canal, of course. Even after the First and Second World War ended, Britain maintained a large base at the canal, cycling thousands of soldiers through Egyptian space to maintain control while the Cold War began and tension escalated in Arabic countries between them and the Jews. And when Israel was established as an independent country, Egyptian forces would routinely search and confiscate Jewish ships, prompting the United Nations Council to reiterate that this was an internationally neutral zone. Other countries got involved, and the presence of tens of thousands of British troops already on the ground in the canal zone made things a little bit messy. And the large numbers of international groups present in the canal zone with loyalties to many different countries also made things even more difficult. Eventually, the Egyptian president Nasser nationalized the canal zone, assuming control over the canal itself, but also everything else present in the zone, which meant that while you were there, nothing really belonged to you, and to take things away meant that you were smuggling, which of course was a crime. Such is the backstory for this novel, and it's a history that, if you know, it makes the novel that much more readable, and it heightens the excitement every time you turn the page and you're wondering what these characters who are representing their countries, what they're going to do next, whether this is going to be a true representation of the complexities of the Suez Canal crisis, or whether it's a figment of Newby's imagination. Hey there, BookTube, welcome back to my channel. Today begins a series of book reviews that I'm going to be doing of the books that have won the Man Booker Prize. This is the winner of the inaugural Man Booker Prize, and so this is the first book in this series called #ManBooker51. During 2019, I'll be reading all the books that have won the Man Booker Prize in its 51-year history, and I'll be doing a short book review of each one of them, probably giving you a little bit of a history tour, because for some of them, I'm going to be learning about the history in order to read and appreciate the book. And I'm not going to take it for granted that you know the history, because in a lot of cases I didn't. I had to do some research before I really got into this book. I started reading and realized that I had no idea about any of the history that this book was describing. And so at page 80, I stopped reading. I went back to do some research, and then I started again. And it made me understand and appreciate the book a lot more. Like other books of this ilk, the characters are meant to represent their countries of origin, and the author, P.H. Newby, plays with multicultural intersections by creating characters who are from one country but married to someone from a different country, and so with a different ideology, different cultural background. And so their loyalties are tested at any one point, whether they're loyal to their country as patriots or loyal to their relationships that they have chosen. And so in this way, he shows the complex relationships that often lead to international crises, like the one we read about in this novel. And indeed, in this one, our main character is having an identity crisis where he himself is not sure of his origins, but he knows that he wants to take advantage of a situation. So he may or may not be lying, or he may or may not be misguided, but his loyalties ultimately are being tested. The story is set in 1956, and when we meet our main character, Jack Townrow, he's on his way to Egypt. His friend Ellie Corey has died, and Jack is pretty sure that Ellie has left a large inheritance, and so he's on his way to claim whatever it is that his friend has left behind, whether that is his wife or his mistress or his belongings. However, in the process, he's not sure what he has to do in order to gain control, but he's willing to do almost anything. And so in the process of Jack traveling to Egypt, we see him interacting with people who are not necessarily in Egypt, but have very distinct attitudes and beliefs about what is happening there. On his journey, he also has interactions with other nationalities, and through those conversations, each character reveals something about their own beliefs, but also the attitudes of their countries and how they see themselves, but also how they see these other people and the other countries that they're talking about. So Jack, who's either British or Irish, depending on which day you meet him, has these conversations with Israelis and Greeks, and those discussions reveal the biases and attitudes that are relics of Britain's involvement in the First and Second World War, but also the relics of colonialism and imperialism even before that. The fact that these characters are representative of their country means that we're probably supposed to paint an entire nation with the color of these characters' deeds or misdeeds, as the case might be. So in this case, we have Jack Townrow, who is a smug Englishman, a self-confessed criminal who's about to go take advantage of some woman who's been left as the heir to her husband's misfortune. And I suppose in this book, the author is trying to get us to view the Englishman through those lenses as well. I mean, I don't know if that's his intent, but that's what kind of comes across as we read more and more of Jack and his escapades. The story itself is told in a rather circuitous way, and the author invites the reader to revisit the same scene multiple times through different levels of introspection. Over the course of the storyline, Jack suffers several blows to the head, and we're never quite sure what the result of those injuries are. And so we're left to ponder each time whether we're being treated to heightened introspection or some kind of version of alternative facts, which might remind you of the experience of reading just about any news report, which could change depending on who the reporter is and when the report was recorded. What does emerge in this book is the tensions between various countries and how those conflicts could impact personal and financial prospects, even as individuals might not feel like they're necessarily involved in those political crises. Newby also explores criminalization in this novel, almost as though he was justifying crimes, but not quite. So in this one, he gave us Jack Townrow, who is the manager of a fund that's earmarked for a cause that cannot be fulfilled. And so when Townrow embezzles the funds, it's almost as though it's okay because the money can't be distributed to its rightful owners anyway, and the money needs to go somewhere, so why not into Jack's pockets? In another instance, he gives us a Jewish woman who's married to an American man who, when he becomes mentally unstable, he's no longer able to fulfill the requirements of the marriage. And so it's almost as though when the woman becomes unfaithful, it's as though the crime of unfaithfulness couldn't be avoided because her husband has essentially abandoned her. In yet another illustration, he gives us an old couple who, when the husband dies and the government restricts the burial, but traditions demand that the surviving wife honor her husband's memory, it's as though she has no choice but to smuggle the body out of the country, almost as if the crime of smuggling her husband's body and his belongings out of the country couldn't be helped. And so in this way, Newby presents the facts and the ideals, but he also shows the various alternatives and the repercussions that would be involved with each one. The story itself is a bit of a wonder as we follow this main character and his existential crisis and his identity issues as he tries to prove to himself and to prove to other people where he is from and try to justify why he should be where he is and why he should have what he thinks he deserves, even though the reader almost knows that he doesn't deserve it. It is a bit of a wonder, but it is very profound if you understand and appreciate the history and read this in the context of what it is supposed to represent. Something to Answer For by P.H. Newby was the inaugural Man Booker Prize winner, and it set the standard of other books like this one that would go on to win the prize that have delved into complex international and political issues to humanize conflicts and in some cases present alternative facts. So let me know if you enjoyed hearing a little bit more about P.H. Newby's Something to Answer For. Let me know if you've read this one or if you want to pick it up now that you've heard me talk about it. I recommend this book. It is one, like I said, if you don't know the history, then you should definitely read a little bit more about the Suez Canal crisis in 1956 and what British involvement meant to creating the conflict, but also to resolving it. Really great book that made me learn something about history that I wouldn't have known otherwise because I didn't know that I didn't know this history. So let me know if you're going to read this book because you've heard me talk about it. So that's a discussion of Something to Answer For by P.H. Newby. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Please subscribe for more. I'll be talking a lot more about other Man Booker previous winners in upcoming videos. This is the first of my Man Booker 51 videos. So leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you enjoyed this video and if you're going to be here for more. So let's talk in the comments, and until next time, happy reading. Bye.